And this is the heart of today's presentation, is user-centered design process, called as UCD. And this user-centered process cannot run in isolation. It has got software development process. So software development process and user-centered design process go hand in hand, and then user-centered software development process is defined. This is what we are talking about, user-centered design. But for the sake of simplicity and today's presentation, since we are talking about the landscape view, I coined this as understand, create, and deliver. So it's a user-centered process. User is at the core of it at every stage of this user-centered development life cycle. We are going to validate this application with the users, but for the sake of simplicity, we call U as a understand phase, C as a create phase, and D as a deliver phase. So what is going to come under U, what is going to come under C, and what is going to come under D? Let's go step by step. Understand. So we have to understand who are the users, their types, their needs and goals, the context of use, what is the competition, so on and so forth. Let's focus more on U, that is understand. In understand phase, what we do is we try to understand who are the users, what is the age, sex of the users, educational background, professional background, from what culture those users are going to come, attitude towards the technology, the habits and behavioral aspects of the users. For example, I am designing an application for a customer support advisor. The educational background of the customer support advisor would be definitely different than if I want to design an application for medical officer. So I would go deeper inside on understanding the needs, the behavioral aspects of medical officer. Also, I will understand whether the medical officer is novice user or intermediate, or he or she is expert. So we need to understand the users in depth in this phase. Going forward, we need to understand what are the user needs, what are the actual needs, what are the latent needs. People at times don't talk, so we need to observe in their daily context, how they use the systems. Are there any pain points? Are there any barriers? Also, we need to understand, are there any special needs? So we need to understand their needs, their goals, and various aspects of the users. Moving to the next slide, understand the context of use. So as I mentioned, if I'm developing an application for a doctor in a hospital who is working in a hospital, vis-a-vis I am developing an application for a production engineer or maintenance engineer who is working on a shop floor, the context is completely different. If I am developing an application for a desktop, or if I am designing an application for a tablet or a mobile, so the context is again different. So in one way, desktop, the person is sitting in her office and doing it at her leisure, or there is no disturbance from external world. But for mobile, the user would be on the run, on the move, and she would be in a hurry. So we need to understand the context while developing an application from usability perspective. Also, we need to understand the usability goals. For example, if I am designing an application for travel agent, so travel agent efficiency and error freeness are very important aspects. Quickly I need to complete the form, send that form without making errors. It's not that I'm traveling, I'm flying to some other country on 2nd of February and she puts a different date. It would be complete chaos. So error freeness and efficiency are the key aspects, our key usability goals. And for a call center, quick resolution of the query. So quick, fast are efficient way of doing it are the usability goals. So it depends on the users, the context of use, the usability goals would vary. So who from the usability team would do this? There is a role defined as user researcher. So user researcher, I'm moving on to slide number 43, is a person who observes and interviews the users. He or she would go into the natural environment of the users to understand how the users work, how they live, how they play, so on and so forth. Also, the user researchers understand the users' goals, tasks, expectations, so on and so forth. And they come back and give their feedback to the usability team. The tools and techniques they use, I'm on slide number 14. There are various techniques these people use. For example, contextual inquiry. So it's a technique by which user researcher or usability team members, they go into the natural environment of the users. If you are designing an application for auto rickshaw driver, I'm just thinking aloud. So you can't be sitting in a office and developing an application. You need to sit next to the auto rickshaw driver and see how he uses the mobile phone or how she uses some kind of application which would be developed. So we need to go in the context of the users. Then another technique is focus group sessions. So it's a participatory discussions wherein you call various members, various users, give them some scenario, ask them how they would react on this, do some whiteboarding, so on and so forth. User interviews is a kind of a structured or semi-structured, I would say, question answer session. It's not actually question answer session but more of a discussion. But user interviews also is one of the ways by which we can capture the user requirements. Surveys wherein we can use some free tools or some appropriate tools and launch the survey and get the feedback. It's typically useful if we want quantitative results are required. Ethnographic studies is again, we'll touch upon this, but it's more of a cultural aspects we need to understand. Suppose if we need to develop some application for China, so we need to understand their culture, their festivals, their needs, or the social relevance, so on and so forth. Again, we can go deeper inside each and every technique because this technique or every technique itself can be a topic of discussion. But we are covering this in this session on very high level. So once we complete this understanding phase using appropriate techniques, using appropriate tools by user researchers, we go into the phase called create phase, wherein we create the solutions, we do task analysis, we develop quick wireframes, validate with the users, do visual design, do testing. We'll discuss this in details. I suppose I'm audible and the voice is not breaking. Unfortunately, I can't get any feedback through this WebEx. I'm just talking blindly because it's not two-way communication, but silence is consent. So I think you guys are hearing me properly and I'm audible. So moving to the next slide, which is slide number 46. So in create phase or create solutions, usability team conducts task analysis. The goals are broken down into various tasks. So they study the task, they prioritize the task and come up with a task analysis. Then information architects come up with, they define the information structure, the hierarchy of the information, how information needs to be segregated, so on and so forth, and come up with the quick prototypes. The prototypes could be made using paper sketches or low fidelity, which is a very kind of details are not much, very high level sketches are there. Fidelity is level of details, so it's not having a lot of details. Just quick sketches one can do, show to the stakeholders. And also, if the stakeholders and users are in sync, they can move ahead with clickable prototypes. As I mentioned during the call that during the session that as we come up with some sketchy ideas, it's appropriate that we go back to the users. If users are not available, showcase this to the stakeholders and have some whiteboarding sessions, show them these early prototypes, get the feedback, and appropriately change. In user experience design, two things are very important. One is validate with the users, and second, iterative design. So it's always changing. Let's not attempt to make it best in the first shot. So it's an iterative process. Once we validate with the stakeholders our early prototypes, we can involve visual designers. Again, it's not a linear process, but for the sake of simplicity, I am explaining in a fashion. Visual design can always get engaged with usability guys also. So visual designers understand the brand strategy. They come up with, or they refer to the brand guidelines, they develop the visual strategy, and come up with the mock-ups, what they call as the visual themes, and those are showcased to the stakeholders. It talks about the color, the fonts, the layout, the visual themes, so on and so forth. For these create things, there are 4 roles, and again these are not independent roles. Information architect and interaction designer can overlap. Usability consultant is a specialized skill, but again in Indian context, many roles overlap. Even in US context now, these hybrid designers or hybrid usability professionals are coming. They do many things together, so they are having multi-skilled people. But for the sake of simplicity and for the sake of understanding of this domain, we are trying to categorize this in 4 different roles: information architect, interaction designer, usability consultant, and visual designer. So information architect is a person, he is a typical usability or user experience architect. What he does is she organizes the structure, come up with the design, develops a layout, defines the navigational structure, and the tools what they use. There are many techniques that they use, but card sorting is one of the powerful techniques what we use in context of ISER is we involve users, and these cards are provided with the names, functions, and design attributes, and we involve users and ask them to categorize the cards, to organize the cards, and it helps understand the mental models of the users, whether the menu structure, what user thinks, are we providing that, so on and so forth. So the card sorting, chunking are appropriate techniques that information architects use. Interaction designer, once the high-level information architecture is defined, interaction designers come into play. They conceptualize the interaction models using paper sketches. They propose the solutions, and these are the guys who convert this textual information into graphical information. And moving to the next slide, they use various techniques which I touched upon about paper prototypes. You can see some samples of the paper prototypes, which are very sketchy things which we scan and share with the stakeholders. If we are developing some application on iPhone, we can even create some paper prototypes based on the screen of a mobile and give it to some of the users. This is how the application is going to look. This is how the application is going to behave. For low fidelity prototypes, we use different tools like starting from PowerPoint, Visio, going towards Axure or Just in Mind. So different tools can be used appropriately based on what level of details of the wireframe your stakeholders expect. And going forward, you can even create the clickable prototypes. Usability consultant is a guy who defines the usability strategy, gets involved into usability testing. So whenever we are conducting usability testing, the usability consultant gets involved and he or she would be a facilitator while conducting the tests. So usability lab testing, this is the technique usability consultant would use. So there are a number of ways by which we test the application or we test the product which is going to be launched. But here is one example, and in Pfizer, in US we have got this usability lab. So this usability lab is typically we invite the participants. If you see on the right hand side, the arrow shows participants. So it's a two room, or you can say a hall has been split into 2 rooms and with a compartment of one-sided mirror. So users can't see the usability team, but UX team members can see the facilitator and a participant. So participant is typically given a task and she completes the task, and by recording, so video cameras are put and they record the facial expressions as well as keystroke or keyboard movement, and the mouse movement is being captured using appropriate tools. So users are invited in such labs. It is a costly affair, but at appropriate time, whenever there is funding, these members are invited in a lab, and the team tests the usability of the application with the actual end users. There is another cost-effective way of doing remote usability testing, which we use from India, because we are not located in US, but all the users are in US. So what we do is we use tools like More for doing remote usability testing, wherein participants meet online and they share their desktop. It's as I mentioned, it's a very cost-effective way of doing it. The benefit of this is if users are in Australia, Europe, and US, you can test the users sitting in India, and also large number of participants can be tested because it's number one cost-effective, and many users can be tested simultaneously. Then visual designer, this is pretty simple because simple, what I mean is not from the skill perspective but for understanding perspective, because the nomenclature itself talks about it. Visual designers are the very creative guys. They define what should be the visual representation of the screen or interface layer. They use the visual language, they understand the brand guidelines, they understand the corporate identity, and they come up with a visual design of interface. So we completed the understanding phase, then we completed create phase, and very important phase is delivery. So understand, create, and deliver. Deliver is the last stage of this user-centered design process. So it's delivering the front end or UI code based on the technology, based on the platform. User experience team delivers either HTML, CSS, or Silverlight, or Flex, or Dojo, whatever technology development team is using. We provide the front end code. At the same time, UX guidelines, best practices, user interface design specification documents, usability test reports are the end deliverables from UX team. For UI development or UI delivery, so UI developer is a key component of this chain. Only thing is, many times they get engaged pretty late in the life cycle, but they are the guys who create the tangible thing. So from concept to creation, these guys get engaged into creation phase. So they create the experientiable prototype, they create the front-end code, and they sit with the development team to make sure that their output becomes useful to the development team. So they develop the front-end code, and make sure that it integrates appropriately with the backend. At the same time, if there are any changes required, these are the guys who help them. This is a typical life cycle we use. This is how it marries with software development team. This cycle that we use at Pfizer. I'm not going into details because it has covered most of the things. It would be repetition for you. So here are the various tools and techniques. As a UX practitioners, we use lots of techniques and tools, and we use this tool depending on various at appropriate time of the UCD life cycle. So if you see, for example, diary studies is fourth from the left, third from the left. So typically users, we can give some diaries which are like bound books, to notebooks to the users, and ask them to jot down their readings, their experiences, and we can collect the diaries after appropriate time and study and come up with the analysis. There is something called as eye gaze tracking or eye tracking. So wherein supposing if I go to a site of timesofindia.com, where I look at first, so how your gaze of eye, so where you are looking, it tracks, and depending on that you can come to know that the location of the photograph or the typography or the importance given to various aspects on the screen is correct or not. So there are, as I said, there are lots of techniques. At the end I'm going to give you the laundry list of techniques and the research material. You can go through that. Design for accessibility, and we are on slide number 63. This is a very important aspect called as accessibility or design for accessibility. So we need to understand that all users are not in the having quote unquote normal needs. They are having some special needs, and product accessibility or software accessibility means even the people who are having this challenge or disabilities can perform, understand, navigate, and interact with the product. So there are n number of disabilities, right from hearing disability, cognitive disability, or visually impaired, people not having limbs, physically handicapped. How you can design an application for a blind people or visually impaired people? So we need to understand the accessibility needs of the users. On the right hand side, if you see that this is a typical chart they used for testing the color blindness. So if you see the three that is mentioned on the left hand side, normal people would look at this three, but the people who are having color blindness will just see brown and gray. Even if you see this traffic signal, red, yellow and green, or red, orange and green, so they see only brown, brown, brown. So this is very critical, so even, for example, even if we want to design an application, software application, we can't use green, red at leisure. We need to understand that, hey, there are 15%, and the data shows that about 15% of the male population in US are colorblind for green and red, which is significant. So while designing the dashboard, while designing the colors, or while designing interfaces, we need to understand that there are some special needs, and we need to consider. Companies like iPhone, Apple, and products like iPhone, they are considering these applications, or even the base product has got design for visually challenged people. So if you are accessible, it can read the text for you, it can read the messages for you, the fonts can be made bigger, so on and so forth. So accessibility is a legal requirement. It's not only CSR, corporate social responsibility. It's not a social work. But in US, if you see this section 508, or in UK, DDA, what they call Disability Discrimination Act, any public-facing website should consider this, that it should be accessible by physically or visually impaired people. You can go to the link which I have put over here, http://www.w3.org.wa. You can find more information about how to make the application accessible for all kinds of disabilities. Moving to the next slide, future direction of the user